Welcome to the Missouri 811 and Kansas 811 podcast. I'm Nick Reza with Missouri 811, and this is my good friend Art York from Kansas 811, and he's here to tell you a little bit about what's going to be on these podcasts.
Great, thanks, Nick. Really looking forward to these podcasts. Nick and I decided a couple months ago that we wanted to put a podcast together, invite some friends, some clients, things like that from across the industries, from utilities, locators, excavators, and we want to talk about what's going on in the field. We thought it'd be a great opportunity to hear some of the success stories out there, maybe some issues they're having. We plan on talking about a little bit of everything from what we've done in the past. Nick and I both have a background in utilities and locating, and now we've both been in the one-call industry for the last 8-10 years. Worked together on a lot of projects, so we wanted to partner up and do this, and so welcome. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please let us know if you're ever interested in being part of our podcast. Reach out to Nick or I. We'd love to have you on, but we really like to have a lot of good guests with a lot of good knowledge out there so you can take something away from it. Also have a little bit of fun while we're doing our podcast. So thanks. Sit down, relax, enjoy the show, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Art.
Oh, well, hello. Welcome to podcast with Nick and Arch. I appreciate you guys joining today, all our listeners on here. We got some special guests we want to introduce this morning to get this conversation going. I'll turn this over to Tom Shimon with Kansas 811.
Well, hello, I'm Tom Shimon, Executive Director of Kansas 811. I guess just a little bit of background for me is I started in 1982 working for MCI Telecommunications as a civil engineer building communication systems. I first got involved with damage prevention in 1986 when one of my construction crews hit an 8-inch gas line. And prior to that, I'd never heard of one call. I'd always just drive up and down the right of way looking for markers, and I would call that utility directly. And for some reason, this gas company did not install right-of-way markers. And so we hit the gas line. And that was when I was made aware of one call. And part of my penance was I would get directly involved. So I got heavily involved in damage prevention in '86, which led to a group of us working nationally with all the one-call centers nationwide to protect our fiber optic cable. And so in 1997, a position opened up at Kansas One Call, and I took the opportunity to become the executive director at that time. And been here ever since. And we've put together a well-oiled organization, and we do our best to prevent damages. So that's kind of a brief history on me.
Well, great. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming today. It's going to be a great discussion. So we'll switch over to Randy Norden with Missouri 811.
Hello, everyone. Randy Norden, Executive Director of Missouri 811. I'm a little newer than Tom, at least as far as in what I would call the damage prevention, or as I call it, the communications industry. I've got over 30 years of experience with the utilities, starting off back in 1994 with Missouri Rural Water Association on staff there, working with a lot of municipalities, water districts, such like that. I also spent a lot of time working with municipalities in the realm of electric, and that was a tremendous learning experience on how electricity is handled, bought and sold. It's really quite remarkable. At that time, I was the Director of Business Development for Missouri Public Utility Alliance. So at that time, I got into this business because an email showed up and says your profile fits a search that we're doing for somebody to be Executive Director of a Missouri not-for-profit. So I ultimately proceeded with that conversation, and I said, can you tell me what this not-for-profit is? And they said, it's an organization called Missouri One Call. Oh! Keep talking. So the reason for that is because all my time in the utilities, I was aware of who Missouri One Call was. And I remember the struggle that was going on at that time where it became mandatory for utilities to be a participant in the Missouri One Call system. where a lot of utilities were they were resistant. They didn't like the idea. They were receiving faxes that were way outside of their service area. And I would see representatives from Missouri One Call come to our conferences and do presentations. They would be pelted with stones and tomatoes, and they would always brush them off and walk off with a smile. And if there's any way I can help you, give me a call. So when the opportunity came up, I thought, this is a mission that I could wrap my brain around. The mission statement of Missouri 811, as we rebranded as, is enhancing public safety and preventing damage to underground utilities. And that is a beautiful mission. That is something that I'm privileged to have the opportunity to be a part of. And it's been there for about 2 years now, doing a lot of work revitalizing the organization and looking to make things work a little bit better for all those involved, utilities as well as excavators.
Oh, that's great. Well, definitely appreciate you coming, Randy. And Nick, turn it over to you just for a second. You didn't get to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Nick Reza. I'm the Education and Marketing Manager for Missouri 811. And Randy, you mentioned about the 811s being a nonprofit, and a question me and Arch get a lot in the field is, how are you guys funded? What's the structure of that? Because could you tell us a little bit about, either one of you, about how 811s are structured and who the board of directors are and how we do get funded?
That's a good question, Nick. And Tom, I'll let you talk about Kansas first.
Well, our board of directors is made up of member utilities, and it's just like any major corporation. They oversee the overall operation of the call center as far as the management goes, and that's basically turned over to the executive director to operate basically as a chief executive officer to run the organization, to monitor all the financials in and outs, and have staff, field liaisons to go out and do public education. As far as being funded, each one of our members who receives a ticket in an excavation area pays us a fee, and that's how we are funded. And so we get no state aid, no federal aid or anything like that. It's all member driven as far as funds coming in.
Randy, you have anything to add to that? Or?
Similar situation in Missouri, and of course, being a not-for-profit, there is a misunderstanding generally with the public that a not-for-profit is not supposed to make a profit. Yes, you can make a profit. The only difference is the organization is operated, as Tom said, by a board of directors, not a group of investors. So you're not trying to return profits to some investors. You're actually trying to return success and results to a board of directors. Same thing in Missouri. We have 19 board members in Missouri. 15 represent the cross-section of the utilities that are within the Missouri 811 system. 4 seats are called advisory seats, and those are represented by 3 excavators and 1 locator. And the advisory seats have the ability to provide tremendous input in all the meetings and what's going on or strategic planning. They just simply do not have a vote yet. And that usually that's based off of really the financial pattern of it. Just like Kansas, the way Missouri 811 is funded is entirely by the utilities. We get an excavation request through our system that costs nothing, whether it's a homeowner or a contractor can submit a ticket at no charge. And then as a general rule of thumb, for every one of these excavation tickets, we send out 5 notifications, and we bill those notifications to the utilities, and that is the entirety of the funding. Like Kansas, we are not a line item in Missouri's budget. We are not a governmental entity. We are a not-for-profit. And it puts us in a very unique situation. One, I love not having government funding. The reason for that is it's much easier to be agile in planning and responsive to the members and the stakeholders rather than having to respond to political or governmental input on your budget. And it gives you much more freedom to respond to the mission.
Great. Well, it's interesting. Both of you, you know, it's a little unique situation today because Nick and I are talking to our bosses.
Yeah,
So we got to make sure we ask the right questions.
This is also a salary review time.
Right.
Let's hope we do well. Archie.
Yeah. But
I would like to add that we hire a contractor to operate our call center, one call concepts. And so we hire them with all their employees, so we have we do not directly take the excavation notices. As an organization, we hire that out to a third party. And that way it frees us up to use them, because they operate in 16 states, to use all that knowledge from nationwide to build a system and enhance that system as time goes by. And I've seen a lot of progress in the past 20, 30 years of technology coming into play to make that more efficient, much like Randy said, as far as our in and out ratio is 1 to 5, 1 in, 5 out. It was as high as 8.
oh wow.
8 to 1. And, but we were able to go and capture good mapping data to be able to refine that locate area down. And again, that creates efficiencies, and I think those efficiencies helps keep our costs down to our membership as well.
With that being said, Tom, we'll back up just a tad, talk about, you both report to the board of directors that are made up of the utilities and some advisors. Nick and I, we report to you guys, and our fellow employees report directly to the executive director. You in turn report to the board of directors. It's got to be interesting at times, I would imagine, because you're dealing, and Randy, with 15 different seats, 15 different personalities, 15 different industries sometimes. Is it ever a challenge to even out the utilities that you work for, telecom versus gas or electric or whatever? Is it, you know, do you get pulled different directions a lot of times from your different board members? Does that happen?
Yes, there is sometimes a directional pull. However, I've really got an excellent board.
Great.
And the philosophy that the Missouri Board of Directors works under, and I have to encourage that philosophy, is come in, take off your utility hat, put on your Missouri 811 hat. And when you do that, and it forces them to see everything in the light of the big picture. So I'm blessed with a board of good people. Whether I identified any one individual, this is an electric person, this is a gas person or such, they're looking at the general picture, and they're good people who look at that with the mission statement in mind to help serve the mission well. So it's the communication thing. It is making sure that's their viewpoint on it, and it helps keep the movement flowing smoothly, as opposed to somebody coming in and having something that's just a single viewpoint from their own utility and trying to express that.
Sure. Yeah, kind of same perspective there, Tom?
Yeah, basically the same perspective. I've seen a lot of turnover and a lot of changes throughout the years of various board members and the industries that they come from. There have been some that have had, you know, they brought their company hat in, and we've had to work through those issues before. But luckily, I have a great board to work with now, and they are focused on the mission of Kansas 811 collectively. So
that's great. I think, and I agree. I think both boards, I know a lot of the members on both boards, really good people, and they strive for that mission as well. But one thing our listeners do need to understand, though, is the board of directors, they are representing a stakeholder group, a utility industry that they work in, that their company is part of. So our members and all of our listeners need to understand that they have a voice on the board as well. So they actually have people that they can contact on the board of directors of a one call and say, hey, I'm in the telecommunication industry. I have a small CLEC out here in the middle of nowhere, but I need some help. How can you help me with Missouri or Kansas 811. So is that kind of the right path to tell our listeners
That path is there, but in reality, I like to push out to the industries, the industry association. So like there's a broadband association or a telecom association, and get that more collective thought, even though that channel you speak of where somebody goes, so-and-so is on the board, I need to talk with you about an issue, a simpatico discussion between the same utilities. Yes, sure, that occurs. And that's actually helpful because that does bring to light any issue that comes to mind and helps to address it.
And shifting gears just a little bit, Tom, you mentioned that in Missouri and in Kansas that the vendor is One Call Concepts that takes the notifications. We don't physically handle that ourselves. Some states, that's all they have. They just have a call center. I think in Missouri we have 7 staff. At Kansas, I think you have 3 staff. Can you guys kind of talk about what is the need in having staff and what benefits come from states that do have some people on hand?
Well, as far as having staff, I mean, I look at myself as I run the organization for the board of directors and for the members. And I can't be everywhere all the time, and it's a big focus of ours for public relations, getting the word out. It still surprises me that we have people out there that dig without calling. And we have spent, I don't know how much money to get the word out, that it's free. It just takes just a little bit of time to get those facilities marked, but yet there are people out there that still digging without placing the call. So we need people in the field to go out and do the education, let them know that we're here, let them know that the service is free, and to just get the word out that Kansas 811 is trying to not only protect the facilities, but protect lives, your life, your crew's life, not to mention those in the surrounding area of those underground facilities. So not only is it damage prevention focused, it's safety focused. We want people to go home to their families in the evening. So.
Yeah, we kind of touched earlier before we even got started this morning. We all talk about this all the time. And Randy, you'd mentioned something that I thought really hit home is a state could have just a call center, right?
Correct.
They could have that. And you kind of elaborate on what you're talking about that. You could have that, but maybe that's not the best process.
Yes, perfect. That is a situation a lot of times a struggle with being the call center, so to speak, is by virtue of Missouri law. And I would clarify something that Nick said. Missouri, like Kansas, we subcontract to One Call Concepts to run the call center. And I use that word very liberally. A few years ago, it was a call center. The room that is actually the call center, on any given day you go in there, there's 2 people in there.
Right.
With the pandemic, it sent everybody home. So we're actually, in Missouri, we see about 86% of all of our locate requests are coming online. So that's why you'll see on our billboards, click or call.
Right.
The call is still there. And with the operation of a call center, that is the core function. And if you look in the law of Missouri, Statute 319, it identifies us as the notification center. And the challenge to it is, as Missouri 811 and as an organization that is based as a nonprofit, there is what I call a greater moral responsibility above and beyond of what is just operate the call center. There is stakeholder involvement. The whole tool, the whole 811 tool was created in Missouri by the utilities. They funded the creation of it. At this time, they are still the ones who finance the operation of it. However, things change. Right. In an excavator, back in 1985, when the Missouri law was kind of written, put into place in 86, excavators were excavating at feet per day. In 2024, if they could be let loose, they could go miles per day. The locating side of it is still a labor-intensive process that must be taken care of deliberately and properly, and has struggled keeping up with that excavating community. So there is a moral responsibility to enhance the communication, the understanding, the workability for all stakeholders involved, as well as that shell of safety, as Tom spoke of. Someone doesn't call in a ticket, someone is careless and strikes a gas line or an electric line, somebody's going to get hurt. Right. Or there's going to be a big news story that day. So there's a very seriousness to this. And as a not-for-profit with a staff, coming back to Nick's original question, that gives us the flexibility to go above and beyond just the normal act of the notification center, get in stakeholder involvement, provide stakeholder education, and help clear up that aura of communication that surrounds this whole industry that is the make it or break it point of success. We find that a lot of the greater problems are solved by communication. It's like excavator and utility. You guys need to talk. Right. Don't just get mad at each other, sure. Talk. And once they do, they finally resolve the issue and it smooths out. So as having the staff, damage prevention staff who are there to assist excavators and utilities with preventing damages from occurring, member operations staff to assist utility to do the little things that are kind of important. Update your notification mapping, update your who's getting the bill, update who's getting the notifications and how you're getting the notifications. That's important stuff to keep that up, and you have to have that common interaction. As well as having a not-for-profit with a staff that gives us the ability to interact with industry organizations. The Association of General Contractors, like a Missouri Land Improvement Contractors Association, Missouri Rural Water Association, Missouri Municipal League, it gives us that flexibility to interact with them and open up the channels of communication and understanding through their channels.
Yeah, that's a lot of really great points. I think a lot of the things earlier, what you were talking about is the utilities that fund it have put it together over the years, but I think you're right. I think as things are coming together, we're seeing more and more it's pushing together just a little bit more for the excavating community. And I think a lot of utilities are realizing that, well, they've always known, but they're excavators too.
Yes.
And those excavators that are out there, probably 90, if not more % of the time, they're actually putting a utility into the ground. Mm-hmm. So they're working for the utilities. And so it's all got to come together. You have that communication. I've had many situations where I've had to facilitate a meeting between the construction side of a business and the utility side of the business and get them to walk down the hall and talk to each other so they could solve some of their problems in the field. So, that happens quite often. So, some of the strategic plans, we talk about a little bit about your staff. We have 3 people in Kansas. You guys have 7 in Missouri. We all do very similar things. We try to partner together on a lot of different things, but there's always a little bit of a strategic plan. We have to try different things to see what's going to work, to get, like Tom mentioned earlier, it amazes me. I've been in the business for 30 years and there's still people that don't call before you dig. And there's still people that I talk to that still act like it's very new to them, even though they've been in my meetings for the last 10 years. They come to my meetings, eat the breakfast I feed them, and then they still act like it's a new process. So getting them to drink the water versus just leading them to the water, right? So
exactly.
As far as the staff goes in the field, some of the responsibilities of the liaisons in the field, the damage prevention managers, like myself, Nick now, he was in that role for a while now, he handles the marketing side. We're facilitators in the field. And do you guys as executive directors look at that? Because obviously we can't solve some of the problems in the field. And none of us ever like to say it's not our job. That's, we all hate that. But sometimes we have to say it's not in our wheelhouse because it's really maybe not something that we can influence or change on. Do you direct your people to facilitate those kind of problems in the field? Because there are certain things you just can't solve, right? They have to solve themselves. What are some of the efforts you guys look at and some of the ideas for your staff to make that happen in the field?
Okay.
Now, just show you, we gotta make sure that we're asking these questions. I know what to do in the field, the Tom's already told me, but we're trying to get our listeners to understand kind of some of the direction that you guys give us, as employees.
Definitely in the strategic planning of it. One of the things we're looking at in Missouri is the efficiency of getting the message and getting the connectivity out. Damage prevention managers, that's a term that's loosely used throughout the various states. That's to describe a person who's there to assist. In my opinion, my viewpoint, I see the damage prevention personnel, they're a combination trainer and a combination technical assistance, resource assistance person. So that comes back to the fact, I'm not from the state, I do not have enforcement authority, and when you have an issue pop up, I typically see where the damage prevention manager is a highly underutilized resource to come in and assist all parties in the direction that is mutually supportive to everybody's investment into that issue. Every once in a while, you wish you did have enforcement authority. You wish,
Right.
but that liaison work not only is to help make the situation better, and then these parties now understand for the next time, but if there's a need to convey anything to regulatory agencies, a public service commission or anybody like that, or an attorney general where there is an enforcement involved, that staff person has that key tools to help everybody in understanding, learn from the situation and improve the situation.
You know, Randy touched on it earlier, the communications between all the parties. I like to look at our notification center as the communications link between the excavator and the utility owner. And not only that, it's the utility locator. I think it's a good time to point that out, that neither one of us, we do not do the physical locates. That is the utility owner's responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
However, sometimes that gets lost even within the companies, you know, especially with the use of contract locators, that they do not even have a good communications link back with the people that employ them. But I see your roles as providing that communications, getting the parties together and mediate sometimes to the extent possible of opening up those channels of communications and get people talking. What's interesting to me is geographically in our state, and I don't know about Missouri, but we have parts of the state, we have no issues. The locates get done on time. The guys, they even probably have coffee together, you know, in the morning. But there's other parts of the states where it's a struggle of cracking that nut of how do you get the education opportunities in there. And I know that, Arch, I've had you focus in on trying to do as many tailgates as you can with individual excavating companies. Go to their shop. They won't come to a dinner or a breakfast and sit down for a presentation with some education. So there's areas where you have to go to them.
Right, that's definitely for sure.
Well, and both of you guys have mentioned the law a little bit in some of the things you've been saying, and I think that's something else that I've heard in the field in the past, like, well, you guys, Missouri makes me do this, or Kansas makes me do this, and can you guys talk about that they actually are state laws, and what you guys do as executive directors to try to influence that, or try to get parties together to correct legislation or make new legislation happen?
Yeah, and maybe kind of let us know who oversees that excavation law in the state, because Nick's exactly right. A lot of people will come to me and say it's the one call law, and
that collectively gets to be a tremendous challenge, because I've got a lot of experience in the utility realm in dealing with legislation, and too often people want to get too much into the law, and then the law becomes constrictive and prescriptive. If you can just keep law simple and then allow the state itself or the notification center or the mechanism of those board of directors, the operations of the executive director and the staff, the input from the excavators and from the utilities to create the operational tools to solve the problems. But sometimes you do have to bring things into the law. In Missouri, the enforcement is handled by the Office of Attorneys General. So that means it's complaint fueled. And that can be a challenge as well. Sometimes excavators are concerned, they're reluctant to file a complaint against the utility because they want to work for that utility.
Right. Yeah.
But likewise, that is the mechanism. So if you want to resolve an issue with it, you must file the complaint. And we strongly urge excavators and utilities alike. So when something is not being handled properly, to file that complaint with the Attorney General, and that's the only mechanism of follow-up. Other states look at various things like enforcement boards or some other mechanism, and that is part of the evolution and the growth of the industry. That's something to discuss.
Sure.
How do we handle the enforcement of it?
Yeah.
But definitely, it is now August, we're getting on the threshold of the 24-25 legislative season, and I'm beginning conversations right now with excavator industry and the utilities, and the larger utilities, the ones that can afford a lobbyist who are invested into activities at the Capitol, the smaller utilities that are lucky that they can afford a locator.
Right, exactly.
But there still need to be represented in this big picture. So now is the time to begin the conversation and work together to develop a strategy to move forward so that the law and the internal operations in Missouri, for example, we call it the business rules. It's like, what are the business rules of the call center, how they operate? How can we create this to where it works equitably and properly for everybody?
So, Tom, is it, I know we operate in Kansas under a different entity. We're not under the Attorney General's office. So, can you explain a little bit how Kansas?
Yeah, I think number one is our statute, it's called the Kansas Damage Prevention Act, which lays out all the rules and regulations, if you will, for excavation and notifications, etc. Our law is enforced by the Kansas Corporation Commission, and just like Missouri, it's complaint driven. And realistically, they have a small staff too. And with all of the incidents that happens within the state, I don't know how they go about their entire process of enforcement. But I do know that they have limited staff and limited time to enforce everything in a statute. And the other thing is, even though we periodically try and clean things up, there's a lot of gray areas in the law, in the statute, and they have to have some sort of interpretation. And from time to time, the KCC will make interpretations that helps clear things up. But that's on a case-by-case basis. And but overall, I think our enforcement procedures that we have in place work fairly well. Again, like Randy said, is that the small utilities a lot of times do not have a voice in what is being decided. And
So with that, question for both of you, and this is a question I quite frankly don't really know. Can one call lobby? Can you have a lobbyist hired by a one call to advocate for things that a one call would want to change?
Yeah, there's it depends, and it probably the various laws are state specific. But for the help of everyone to understand, it depends on what you call lobby.
Okay.
exactly.
Do we go to a politician and go, here is $5,000, you're going to see it my way, right? No. We do not do that. We do not have a PAC, a political action committee. We do what is generally referred to as grassroots lobbying. which is we come in and educate legislators. We discuss with legislators and with those who are involved in legislation on what the problems are and what are good solutions. And we essentially allow that system to work it out. But to make it clear, do we come in and just strongly trying to influence people financially or anything? No, not in that sense. It's more educational and outreach.
Well, would it be fair to say that changing legislation isn't an easy process? Like, it's not like flipping on a light switch. There's a lot of things that go into that to actually get a law passed.
It is not, and it's that way by design. You know, it's you don't want it to have it too easy to change the law. Then, you know, the authors of the United States founding documents arranged that so people are driven by their interest and passion. So we set up the mechanism to where you can't just have an immediate passion, rush in and change the law. So it requires discussion, conversation, and sorting the issue out.
Yeah, based on our bylaws, our organization is a nonprofit. We have to be very careful on how we lobby, as Randy stated. We cannot give monies, but we can sure go and talk to people, or get groups together to iron out some differences so you go as a unified front. I know that when we go to committees and testify, the legislators are looking for people to work out your issues prior to coming to the session, the meeting, the hearing. And because then they'll take all that input, and the more unified everybody is, the easier it is to get passed. However, if you get a couple of entities or organizations that are highly opposed to it, that do have a lot of influence, that can kill a bill.
Right.
And so it's, and the other thing about opening the statute is you always run the risk of something happening that you do not want at all, that is not good for the industry, number one, but somebody will sneak something through. And
So I guess that's why it's very important to be very involved as an executive director.
Very much
very
so.
involved.
You know, Tom pointed out something that's very important, and now I'll speak a little bit on behalf of the legislators. As Tom said, they need an industry to have it sorted out. And when you have a divided industry coming to the legislators, they're conflicted. And I have had legislators tell me, says, don't make us figure it out because we'll mess it up.
Right.
It says, you guys talk, you get it sorted out and bring us something in unity. And so that's the best route to go. It doesn't always work that way. You know, quite open and honestly, something that may come up along this year is if I'm an excavator and the job's not marked and I have downtime, should I be compensated for that downtime by virtue of the law? That's up for discussion, you know.
That's a big one.
That is a big
That's
one.
a big one.
And so there's going to be this financial entity that's going like, no, and this one says, but we should, and so it has to be debated and has to be sorted out.
So along that same lines, and I know we're pushing up against time limits here just a little bit because we want to be respectful of your time, and we're fortunate enough we're going to have another meeting today.
Yep.
Actually, Missouri and Kansas, all our staff are getting together, and we're going to have some brainstorming, so we're looking forward to that. But along the lines, to kind of wrap up the whole law part, the legislative part, as executive directors, do you guys monitor and watch other states when laws change to see what's impacted or what law passes in another state, for instance, to be prepared for something like that? And
You know, just legislatively, and I would say even in the bigger picture, it should help everybody to understand. I don't live in a bubble in Missouri. Tom doesn't live in a bubble in Kansas. I talk to Tom, I talk to Brent down in Louisiana, Tim in Kentucky, go and talk with all of my colleagues, and we talk about what is going on. So just like, as you expressed a while ago, Kansas and Missouri are meeting today to just discuss how to conduct business. Maybe there's a way we can do it better.
Well, I've probably got one more question, and we can probably turn it over to them. Anything else you guys would like to say? But Randy, with you being new, 2 years, I think, as executive director, where would you like to see the organization go, or is there a direction you're wanting to head? for the listeners out there?
Well, exactly. You know, one thing when I came in is we rebranded Missouri from Missouri One Call to Missouri 811, and that just simply is because it's trying to demonstrate a unity in the industry. Missouri 811, Kansas 811, Kentucky 811. There are some other states with different names, but it's bringing that unity and looking at not just what's going on in Missouri, but what's going on in Missouri and in the entire industry and how it affects the big picture, and aligning Missouri to be with the industry. So that's also opening up within Missouri, listening to the excavating community and listening to the utilities and making sure that we have a comprehensive movement forward that is working for everybody. And it's like, let's bring this up to today's standards.
Yeah, thank you. Tom, do you have anything?
I think we're continually looking for efficiencies to keep the costs down. And, what's the most efficient way of getting the message out to call before you dig or click before you dig?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, one of our priorities, or my priority as the executive director, is always looking for those efficiencies to, like I said, keep the cost down to our membership, to make it the most efficient as possible. And that could be improving our mapping, that could be improving our systems, working with One Call Concepts with new ideas of how we can get better information of how to reach trouble areas in the state that pops up. Looking for new infrastructure projects. This rural broadband is coming, and what's the best way to address all of those, because a lot of those excavators come from out of state and they overwhelm the city. They do not have the locators to do that. So how can we get this information either from a national level and get it to the areas that need that through open communications?
Very good. That's great. Well, gentlemen, we want to respect your time. Like I said earlier, we're going to wrap things up today. We greatly appreciate you guys coming. It's been a great podcast. Nick, thanks for everything.
That. We'll need to flip it sometimes, and we need to interview.
I don't like that.
I
don't think we're
We'll
going to
be
do that.
tested on that. That's not good. But once again, thank you guys for your time today. Thanks to all our listeners out there. Join in, listen, give us some feedback. And as always, if you ever want to be part of our podcast,
Absolutely.
reach out to Nick or I. We would love to, we want to talk about everything.
Please do.
From
To the
excavators,
listeners of the
anybody.
podcast, we
Yeah.
appreciate what you guys are doing out there, and encourage you to wake up every day with gratitude.
Absolutely.
All right.
With
Thank you.
safety in mind.
There you go. Thank
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well, that's it. Arch, do you have any final words?
No, just want to say thank you for joining today. Appreciate your time. Hope you got a little knowledge out of it, had a little fun. See you next time.
See you next time.